Both an art and a science, valuations are complex things and their impact is enormous, making the difference between generational wealth creation and a comfortable retirement. At BizVal, we know how tough it is to grow and run a business, which is exactly why we've made valuations simpler. Whether you are using our online tool BizVal Live or reaching out to us for a concierge offering where we spend more time on your numbers and your business and give you detailed feedback, you can be sure that the same techniques being used by professional investors are also being used by us. And with BizVal Bootcamp, we will prepare you for those discussions with investors. Welcome to this episode of the BizVal podcast with your host, The Finance Ghost. I'm doing this in person, which I never do. I mean, if you know anything about the Finance Ghost story, you'll know full well that I try to keep it anonymous for general fun reasons. But I thought I'd break my own rules today because we are sitting in a restaurant, a very, very cool restaurant in beautiful Cape Town. If you're listening to this overseas, the best time to visit Cape Town was yesterday. The second best time is right now. So get on a plane, come to Cape Town. And when you are here, bring those dollars and pounds and euros and whatever else you may have and come and check out a restaurant called Galjoen. Now, I'm lucky enough to know the head chef here personally, which is how I managed to get through the door. Because even finance ghosts don't just get to walk in here whenever they want and record podcasts. It's a very, very special place. Probably the most exciting new seafood restaurant probably in South Africa, I'm sure at least in Cape Town. I see a lot of people talking about it, and who best to speak to about it than the co-founder, Neil Swart, and then also Serge Raemaekers, who is the founder of ABALOBI, and ABALOBI is a supplier to Galjoen. So we've actually got the whole value chain here, which is really exciting, and that's why I decided to do this in person. Also because we get to listen to some interesting chopping sounds in the background. I don't know how many of them will come through on the podcast, but if you hear any funny noises, they're on purpose, because we are in a restaurant that is preparing for tonight's service. So that's enough from me. Neil, Serge, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's good to be here.
So Neil, you've not done a podcast before.
This is my first.
Wonderful. Serge, you've done a couple.
I've done a few, but not in a cool setting like this.
No, I mean, listen, I haven't even done one in a cool setting like this. So this is very exciting. So let's start with the setting. And Neil, that means you. Let's just talk a little bit about you, actually. I mean, you're a chef.
I am.
Damn good one. I've eaten what you make. It's very good. So Belly of the Beast is the other restaurant that you own, which will be familiar to a lot of people listening to the show, I'm sure. But I would like to spend a couple of minutes just because I'm also fascinated by this industry. And I think a lot of people are, right? It's inspired many a movie, many a series. It is one of those glamour roles, is to be a high-end chef. I'm keen to understand from you, what has been the journey to get here, and is it like the movies?
I think I stumbled into this. Like a lot of chefs that I know, especially I think the ones that are getting a little bit older, most of them did something else before and kind of just stumbled into chefing at a later stage. I think nowadays it's more popular to be a chef because of the movies and all the Master Chef and all that. So it looks romantic and people get into it at an earlier age. I had no idea what I was going to do and just stumbled into the profession and kind of stuck.
That's fascinating. So you were not at the kitchen table, age 5, busy chopping up carrots.
No, I was busy eating. So I always say I grew up in the kitchen, not cooking, but just like looking for something to eat. And then I realized that it's probably just easier to learn how to cook. So,
Talk about understanding your customer.
Exactly.
Yeah? That's the key. And you're not doing this alone. You have a partner in this business.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about her?
So Anushka, we met as students, and so we've been working together since 2011 or 2010. And the relationship just grew, and we grew into business partners. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. And would you do it alone? I mean, without Anushka listening, this is not a trick question, but this feels like something that you need a partner.
So I had a restaurant before, and Anushka actually worked there. And when we opened up Belly of the Beast, she said she actually wants to be involved. And it was a great decision. It gives you a little bit of more freedom, having somebody that you really trust. If you do it alone, restaurant it's not a fun little project on the side. Mm-hmm. It is a full-time thing. So if you have a partner that you're really trusting, you can have a little bit more time in doing life.
Yeah, exactly, because this place just doesn't close. Right.
It doesn't. No, we actually opened Belly of the Beast 7 days a week before we opened Galjoen. Because we had the staff for Galjoen ready, the project was a little delayed. So everyone worked at Belly. It was 7 days a week, and that is that's hard.
No, that is intense. Serge, you're busy on boats, sustainably fishing out there, looking out into the horizon and the ocean and living the dream.
That's kind of it. First, before I kick off, I just want to say it's really good to be here. For someone like me to be in a seafood restaurant, to be talking to a chef who can cook seafood like no other, and then to do a podcast to talk about fish. I'm in my zone. I'm in my element. Thanks for setting this up. But yeah, I'm Serge, and as you said, I run an organization called ABALOBI. And stumbling is potentially the theme of this podcast. I definitely stumbled into this. My background is fishery science. For many, many years, I spent 90% of my time studying fish, studying ecosystems, studying how fishers interact with our ecosystems.
Fantastic. So stumbled to a point. I mean, you both obviously got the background that would have led to something like this. I think it's not that different to me. I mean, I'm a CA by profession, and here I am doing stuff about business. So I guess it's just a tweak on that. You know, it's a fine dining restaurant, or it's sustainable fishing, or in my case, it's more writing and podcasting these days than it is actually, you know, number crunching in Excel, although I do a fair amount of that as well. And that's obviously what we tried to build in Bizval as a way to make that simpler. So a concept that I always think about is as you grow older in life, and this has been my own experience, and I'm keen to see if it's been yours as well. You know, you kind of learn, number one, what you're good at, and genuinely good at. I think it's important to, you know, humility is very important, but you've also got to say to yourself sometimes, hey, like, I make better food than that guy. You know, I should cook. It sounds stupid, but, you know, Usain Bolt runs, or at least he used to. He didn't go and try and do the high jump or the pole vault. He figured out what he was good at. And I think the other important thing is what you enjoy. You know, and if you get your life right, then at the intersection of those two things, if you can imagine it as a Venn diagram, is what you should be doing. That is what you should be doing with your life. I mean, do you each feel like that is what you are now doing with your life? I'll go first with you, Neil.
The focus thing that you said is that I live by that. We often get people that ask for things that we don't do. And I've learned from mistakes in the past that now I can say, you know what, we do what we're good at, and we focus on that and nothing else. So we're not going to do outside catering and stuff just because there's some money on the table. We do what we do, and we focus on it.
Yeah,
so I agree with you.
Absolutely. There's some good Cape Town street noises. I wasn't joking about being here in the restaurant. There's a nice alarm outside. Serge, what about you? You doing what you were born to do?
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. You know, the program we've built over the last couple of years and the impact we are able to realize in South Africa in terms of rebuilding our fisheries, into driving socioeconomic development, but also reviving our oceans. It's extremely inspiring. It's exciting to be working with small-scale fishers and chefs like Neil. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah, no, exactly. I definitely get that vibe from both of you. So let's just talk about the concept of Galjoen. I mean, it's a fish that a lot of South Africans know about, but I think for those who don't, assume no knowledge, like, what is the concept behind the name and this particular restaurant? Because there's some very interesting stuff about what you've done here.
Me and Nishka we've been talking about a seafood restaurant for years, actually, and we kind of started planning it pre-COVID already, and luckily didn't do it. Pulled the trigger on it, and after COVID, when things started ramping up again, we felt comfortable to pull the trigger on it. So we were just always thinking, we get questions, where do we go for good seafood in Cape Town? And we couldn't come up with an answer to give people, because there's seafood restaurants that you go and you sit down and you eat salmon and you eat prawns and you eat Patagonian squid, and you're looking out over the ocean, and where, you know, they don't come from here, those things. So we never felt comfortable in saying go here for good seafood, and then we created it. And the name also just popped up one day, and as soon as we thought of it, we loved it, everything about it. So it's amazing how little people actually know that is our national fish.
Yes.
So that's the one reason. The sustainability part was the other part. Like, Galjoen was heavily overfished, which Serge will be telling us more about, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So Galjoen just made sense, and we also did a little bit of research about it, and it's a very hardy fish, and like, it can navigate difficult waters, and I think if you're in the restaurant industry, you have to have some of those characteristics yourself. So we loved the name immediately.
Yes, goldfish wouldn't quite work. You know, we'll leave that for the musicians.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So, Serge, this overfishing concept, I mean, this is your passion, right?
Yeah,
and I think it's important for people to understand that, because, I mean, I guess the people don't realize, they look out at the ocean and they go, geez, that's huge. You know, there are many fish in the sea, as anyone in the dating game gets told all the time, much to their depression. But that's not how it works, right? I mean, fish get overfished. It gets very damaging. It's a very delicate ecological balance. And I think that is your passion. So I think it's, let's run through what ABALOBI is. And also it's a bit of a social enterprise, isn't it? People don't understand what that is. So I'd like to talk about that as well.
All right, let me unpack it a bit. First of all, I want to say, and I want to congratulate Neil for calling his restaurant Galjoen and to trying to make a bold step to say, hey, we're living along the coastline. We're at the interface of this majestic Benguela current, the Agulhas current coming down from the east coast. We're in one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in the world. And putting out a restaurant that it's called Galjoen, which is our endemic fish, which is our national fish, which is symbolic to a lot of overfishing and the overfishing narrative out there. And then, reimagining how people connect with seafood in this kind of place. That's exactly why we set up ABALOBI. So let me start. First and foremost, I think, we are exposed in the media, in various kinds of media, to this notion that our oceans are stuffed, that everything is overfished, and that we, potentially should be disengaging from seafood, and we should be buying or eating farmed seafood or not eat seafood at all. That's where I come in. I totally disagree with this. Hundreds and thousands of scientists and fisheries managers around this world disagree with this. 500 million people that derive a livelihood from our oceans disagree with this. Oceans, while in some cases, in some fisheries, for some stocks, are overexploited, at the same time are also where there is the most potential. Seafood, ocean fish are one of the most regenerative stocks out there. We can rebuild fisheries relatively easy. We know how to do this, and by rebuilding the fishery, we can't just rebuild the ocean health, but we can feed millions of people and connect restaurants like this with local fish caught offshore here. And so ABALOBI is all about that. It's all about trying to reimagine our seafood and trying to find a more direct connection between people eating seafood at home, or people eating seafood in a restaurant, or people buying seafood at any kind of market, and who catches that fish. Because who catches that fish really matters if we start deconstructing broader social and economic issues in South Africa, but also, of course, if we start reimagining, how do we unlock the stewardship of small-scale fishers in reviving our oceans. And just one last thing on this is, at the beginning you said ABALOBI or Serge is a supplier to Galjoen. That's not entirely correct. ABALOBI is a connector between Chef Neil and the small-scale fishers who provide their catch to this kitchen.
Okay, so ABALOBI is actually a platform. It's basically a platform business.
Spot on.
Okay, and that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
But it's a platform business with a difference, in the sense that it's not about sort of individual opportunities for small-scale fishers to advertise their catch and see who bites, literally, and who connects with these fishers. It's about trying to create a movement of and a collective of small-scale fishing communities along the coastline who can aggregate their premium quality, fully traceable catch, and then offer that to restaurants like this one and a range of other market channels.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, that's very clever. So, I mean, Neil, from your side, then the appeal is you kind of know what you're getting. You know it's been sustainably fished, and you have one point of contact being ABALOBI, as opposed to going and trying to find all these, fishermen yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we can't do it without, I want to say, good suppliers, but as Serge said, the supplier is actually the guy for catching the fish.
Yeah.
But we can't do it without them. We just don't have the connections, the time even to build those relationships. So it's a great concept. People love it. If I serve a dish and I explain to them that this is from ABALOBI and explain to them what they do, and they can go on our website and scan this little QR code and see where that fish comes from, get actual information about who caught it and where it was caught, people just go nuts for it.
Fantastic. So ABALOBI, you're competing with, I suppose, the bid corps of this world. I mean, the classic food service businesses, but obviously they don't have the layers that you do in terms of your strategic differentiation. And maybe let's talk about that a little bit, because this is, at the end of the day, a business podcast. Even though I'm getting hungrier the more I sit here. Chef Iska's walked in, so she's ignoring me now. I'm waving at her across the restaurant. Now she's waving back. Getting very hungry. I've tasted her oysters now. Outstanding. Let's talk about the strategic differentiation of ABALOBI versus just other suppliers, and how do you think about that?
Yeah. So what we're trying to achieve within ABALOBI is move away from any kind of greenwashing or blue washing. We're trying to bring back authenticity in the seafood sector, transparency by buyers connecting directly with the suppliers and the various elements within the supply chain, and by offering an opportunity for people to purchase local, to purchase from fisheries where fishers catch with low impact fishing methods, to purchase from small-scale fishers who are eking out a livelihood from our oceans, but at the same time are at the front line, are the stewards of being able to observe and being able to engage with key ocean challenges. And all of that is, of course, underpinned by our data framework. I mentioned right at the beginning, I'm a fishery scientist, I'm a total fish nerd. Data is my thing. I'm an accidental entrepreneur, and this market platform is actually all about data. How do we create a flywheel through this marketplace platform that allows us to build up a knowledge base, to build up a high resolution knowledge base around what is going on along our coastline, what is actually going on along our coastline? How do we think about the status of Galjoen or the status of yellowtail or any of the other species? How do we tap into the local ecological knowledge of fishers and capture that into canvas that into some kind of data framework that can give us an idea of, well, what do we do next? What's the next move now that we've connected all these fishers with Chef Neil, and we've created a bit of a direct D2C supply chain? How do we then start tweaking fishing effort? How do we start tweaking fisher behavior towards abundant species, towards leaving some of the stocks that are overfished alone for a while, towards better understanding, what the potential is to rebuild these stocks?
And that's the beauty of this ecosystem, right? I mean, Neil, you would not have this restaurant if you could not buy sustainably fished fish, for want of a better way to put it. Serge, you don't have a business, even if it's got a social enterprise angle to it, if you don't have restaurants who understand the value of that and are willing to buy into the story, and that's why it's so good to do this with both of you, because people don't realize, I think, the entire ecosystem that is required for their particular business to exist. So I'll give you a very personal example for mine. I don't believe that if I started the Finance Coast now in this environment with interest rates much higher and people under pressure, I'm not sure it would work. Equally, I'm not sure, or I know for a fact it wouldn't have worked maybe 5 years ago. There were not enough people who had the ability to access the markets and invest. So the trigger for this thing to work was easy equities taking off. And now has more than 1 million South Africans who have a stock brokerage account just with them. And those are mostly people who wouldn't otherwise be investing directly. They would have just gone to their financial advisor and said, listen, how much do I need to save every month? You decide where to put it. So without easy equities, there's no Finance Coast, without a doubt. And I guess that's the thing that people need to understand. It's what has changed that allows your business to become a thing? And I guess, Serge, for you, it's very much the emergence of these platform businesses. I think people understand a little bit more about the value of what that means. The exponential value of having more fishers on your platform and more restaurants buying from you and the data you can create in the process. And Neil, for you, I think it's also just this love of fine dining, actually, which for me it feels like has come up a lot in the last maybe 10 years. People have way more interest in food. I think you can say thanks to TV to a large extent for that, to be honest, way more so than 20 years ago, certainly. So yeah, it's just interesting to understand how these things all actually work together. And Neil, what I wanted to ask you, and we talked about it a little bit before starting the podcast, but a business like this, the success of a fine dining restaurant, what does it come down to? Because I'm not sure it comes down to the sort of really strong operational execution level stuff. And I don't mean the food. I mean how many glasses are there, and when last did you do a stock take? I'll use the funny example you gave me before the show. You can share you can decide whether or not to share that publicly. But is this very much just art, and is it very different to going and buying a KFC franchise in terms of how you run the business? Never mind the food.
I think that this concept it's a little different than at least what I was used to. I had a normal 7-day-a-week bistro neighborhood style operation before this, and there you play policeman. You doing stock takes every day, and it's just a fight against your food cost and fight with your suppliers to get the cheapest price possible so you can have your price as low as possible, and that didn't work for me. And so I sat nights awake and came up with this concept. And what we do here, I don't know if everyone knows, is we don't have a menu, so people come and they just sit down and eat whatever we serve them, and people seem to enjoy it. I know I hate going to a restaurant and having to read the menu and make tough choices. You can just come and sit down and eat whatever we serve, And by doing that, we eliminate wastage altogether. So I know tonight I've got 30 guests coming, and we have, a snook dish on the menu. I need 30 little pieces of snook, and I'm going to cook all of them, and I'm going to have nothing left at the end of the day. Where if you have an a la carte restaurant, you have to guess what people are going to order, and stuff just sits in your fridge and gets old. So I think the concept there, it makes it work, but on the business style end of it, because I know what I have to sell or what I'm going to sell, and I don't have any wastage, so I can keep very tight control of my food cost.
Is that why in the restaurant industry we'll typically see stuff like, the chef special at an a la carte restaurant? Is that generally speaking an attempt to kind of get something out of the fridge?
There's a bit of that going on.
Yeah.
I think you must read Kitchen Confidential,
Okay.
a book by Anthony Bourdain, and
Yes.
he always said never order, this is in New York, never order fish on a Monday, because that fish would have arrived on a Friday or something like that, But yeah, people do, you have to come up with clever ways in using things, and we do a little bit of the same, because we like to use everything. So we take all the tail ends of the fish, let's say, that doesn't necessarily make a nice portion, but we'll create a sauce out of that. So you have to be creative and use every little bit to make it work financially as well.
And Belly of the Beast, similar story, but just without the fish?
Yeah, it's 100% the same concept there. We just don't limit ourselves to fish. But we do limit ourselves to the borders of South Africa. So we get at least all our proteins, everything is local there.
Okay, fantastic. And that's obviously red meat. I mean, you don't serve fish there at all.
We do,
eh?
yeah. It's always a balanced menu between red meat and fish, and even some vegetarian stuff. People always loved our seafood courses there.
Okay.
And that also helped us along to open up a seafood restaurant.
Got it. Very, very cool. Yeah, the business model is fascinating, and obviously the wine pairing is a big part of it, right? At any fine dining establishment. I mean, that's definitely part of it. But yeah, it's this wonderful, I love the low waste point. I mean, it's actually like the most sustainable way imaginable. It's almost like hosting a dinner party every night. You know how many people said yes?
Yeah.
As opposed to a normal restaurant where, as you say, you just have to guess. So it's a completely different life to have a restaurant like this, I suppose. It's very, very interesting. Serge, from your side, the social enterprise angle, that's something I just want to touch on a little bit more. People don't understand what that means. Does that mean that, is ABALOBI a for-profit companies? Just walk us through. What does that mean?
Let me unpack it a bit. ABALOBI is a hybrid. We're at front facing. We're a non-profit. We set up a non-profit as we kind of emerged from a research project that I was leading at the University of Cape Town, and we wanted to symbolically co-found something with the fishers we work with. So my co-founders are fishers. And we kicked off as a non-profit because we knew that what we were trying to do was very different to any other kind of typical startup that raises angel investing potential seeds and then goes from there. We knew that we were disrupting a supply chain. We were reinventing a whole bunch of connections that weren't there before, and we needed to iterate a lot. Over the last 5 years, there's been so many versions of ABALOBI as we try to really build out that unique opportunity that really connects these two worlds, the fishing communities and the market. And so non-profit was an ideal vehicle to kick off things with. But over the years, as we've learned better on how to balance our impact metrics, so how we engage fisherwomen in the supply chain, how we look at sustainability of the ecosystem, how do we make sure that everything we do is wrapped around this data layer and this idea of building this knowledge base around our oceans. We've been able to weave in the social enterprise angle, been able to move towards much more of a commercial model that aligns the fishers in their commercial business with ABALOBI, with the market. And so we run the marketplace within a non-profit, but we run the tech within a for-profit that allows us to scale. We're doing this in about 12 countries. I don't know if you know this.
No, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
South Africa is obviously our flagship program. That's where we've made the most progress. That's where we're the biggest. But at the same time, during the pandemic, we knew we couldn't travel, but our software could travel, and we were getting a lot of requests from fishing communities, fisher groups, fish cooperatives, associations around the world, hearing, saying, hey, we've heard about ABALOBI, we've heard about this this group of South African tech people and scientists and fishers and chefs coming together and trying to create something different. We want to do the same, and so we thought, hey, this is an interesting opportunity. Let's give it a go. And so for a sort of a very proudly South African software startup in South Africa to have versions of our platform going in Chile, in Palau, in Ireland, in the Seychelles is extremely exciting.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, is that what you envisaged when you started this thing?
Not at all.
Yeah, that's always how it goes, right? Neil, something I want to ask you about the restaurant industry. I think everyone knows how famous restaurants are for not working. And obviously you've made this successful, and I have no doubt it will continue to be successful. But in your view, and not a fine dining question specifically, just restaurants in general, why is this industry so difficult commercially? Why is the fail rate so high for people who open their dream restaurants and hope it's going to work out?
It comes down to the romance of it. Like somehow it sounds romantic to open a restaurant. People have no idea what goes into it and how many hours and blood, sweat, and tears goes into it. Worst thing to do is open up a restaurant with your retirement money. There's easier ways to spend
To
your
lose
money.
everything. Yeah, just go gamble it instead. Make it
gamble.
faster.
At least you'll have fun doing it. No, that sounds very bad, but it's like you have to grow up in this industry to really know it. And some people make delicious food at home. That's a different thing. I would say do something with your money that makes you more money. Maybe learn from the ghost how to invest the money, and then just invite people to your house and have delicious dinner parties and cook your heart out and do it all for free. That sounds very, very harsh saying that. It is a tough business, as you know. I think the statistics show that. It comes down to, again, my concept that I just think works. And that's why we're able to scale it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very tongue-in-cheek comment, like just follow the finance guys and listen to that about the markets. But there is actually an underlying point there that has nothing to do with me, which is, if you're thinking of investing in a restaurant, and I personally think that if you are not a chef yourself, you need to be very careful. I don't know if you'd agree with that, actually.
100%.
Yeah. I think that's when the romance really just takes you, we should open a coffee shop and it'll be adorable and all our friends will come and, you sit there all day. No, it's hectic. You're almost better taking your money and going and buying shares in Spur, to be completely honest. Take the romance out of it, go and invest in a proven business that actually gets it done, and rather go and get the romance out somewhere else.
You open yourself to an industry that's get judged every moment of the day, which is it's fine because that's what you choose to do. But if you don't know that before you open up a restaurant, and it's a game nowadays, and we have MasterChef and these things to thank for the growth in restaurants because people love food, as you said earlier. But it also opens up this judging game. I watch MasterChef, so I know about food now, and then you come to a restaurant and point fingers at the guy's jus is a little bit too thin for your liking or something, and go write about it on the internet.
Hence the movie The Menu, right? I mean, that's largely, if you haven't seen that, you need to go watch that. It's wild. Have you seen that, Serge?
No, I haven't. But
I think if you watch The Menu, you might stop supplying this industry. You might be a little bit scared of what might happen to you if a chef goes a little bit mad. Go watch it. It's great. But that is the issue. And I think when investing, you've got to be super careful to take emotion out of it. That's why business is different. And also that always on. I mean, I know the feeling. Geez, I never intended for this to be a daily newsletter business, specifically Ghost Mail. Never. I started it as a weekly newsletter, basically for fun. The problem is once it's daily, it's daily. And that means if you're sick or you had a bad day or you're just generally tired and you don't feel like writing. And that's the other thing. It's not, I'm going to use an analogy that makes more sense other than when I use it here, but it's not flipping burgers. The analogy doesn't make as much sense here, clearly. But it's similar here. You've got to show up every day. It takes one bad night, one bad review, and suddenly, you're only as good as your last dish. Yeah. I mean, that's the reality.
That's unfortunately the ones you remember is the bad ones. And I actually wanted to do, while we're on that sort of subject, we claim to be a local sustainable seafood restaurant, which I think we try as hard as we can. We have a little bit of a blanket approach, but it opens you up to criticism. When you say we're a sustainable seafood restaurant, it's very easy for people to look at every single thing you do and point fingers, where it's a little bit of a weird mind thing, because if you don't say you're sustainable, you can do whatever you want and you won't have anyone outside the door.
Yes. No, there's always a critic. There's always someone who can and wants to do it better, and then they never do it themselves. And yeah, it's interesting. I think I don't know if you suffer from imposter syndrome, either of you, but I mean, I really do. And if you're not sure what imposter syndrome is, you're listening to this, it's kind of that belief that everything you achieve is luck, and you're not quite sure why it worked out, and you generally forget that it was due to you, and it actually was, just anyone could have done this. And a lot of humility comes from that, which I think is a good character trait to have. But it's also quite dangerous for an entrepreneur, because at some point you need to recognize that actually you're doing what you're doing for a reason. It's because you're the person who did that. And a lot of people shout from the sidelines, but they've never gotten in and actually gotten their hands dirty. And most people who are such critics of this have never run their own business. I think most entrepreneurs are a little bit more forgiving of other entrepreneurs, because we've all been there. We've all had that day where either a dish went wrong, or I made a mistake in a newsletter that went out to a whole lot of people, and now I have to wear that. Serge, what's a good example of a mistake in your average day? Give us one. I can't think of one offhand.
Yeah. Our platform is run by fishers, so more than half of my team are people that come from fishing communities that have very few other opportunities and are trying to find a role in this post-harvest opportunity, this marketplace platform. And so they're learning fast, and they're championing this, but there's no doubt that we might miss an order, or we might deliver Neil's order at Belly of the Beast instead of Galjoen. These little things happen, and they happen when there's a bit of stress, and they're part of the journey. And for sure, client is king, and we make it work and we make it up. But that's definitely part of the journey.
No, definitely.
For me, though, I think we all have a responsibility to use these kinds of podcasts and kind of our voice to help people really reimagine what sustainability is. There are a lot of people who have an attitude of go green or go home. I'm only going to eat something that has a certified sustainability tick on it, or comes from a veggie patch right next door, or is part of a restaurant with they've got solar panels and a grey water system and for us within ABALOBI, that's not our starting point. We were realistic. We are realistic that we are working in South Africa. There are a whole bunch of economic, ecological, and social challenges, and our whole motto within ABALOBI is, "Hey Neil, we're not about go green or go home, but hey Neil, with what you're doing here, you can get us and help us get from red to orange to green."
Yeah, I have a question for Serge. A question that I often get is, on the ABALOBI platform, we often see fish there that's available for us to buy and use in the restaurant that's on a red list or on an orange list. But I know you've spoken to me about a full basket approach or something like that. So we'll buy a fish that's maybe on the orange or even the red list and use it in the restaurant, and then I sit with the customer that knows this fish is on the red list, and why are you selling it? So I get difficult questions, and I'd love for Serge maybe to touch on that.
Oh, great. Let's dive into that. So we try and connect with fishers where they are at in their journey. Seafood system is so broken that the large majority of fishers only have market access for those species that are concerned. Think about cob, think about Miss Lucy, think about Cape salmon or geelbeck. That's what fishers have access to or market access to when they arrive at the harbor. That's what they think the market wants. Okay, so we connect with them where they're at, and then we work with those same small-scale fishers underpinned by the data framework to try and stimulate the market and the fishers to move towards buying consistently species that are more abundant. Think about yellowtail, think about carpenter silvers, think about Cape bream. But that doesn't happen overnight. Why? Because the middlemen at the harbor, they're still looking for cob and geelbeck and all these other species. Most restaurants, they like working with ABALOBI, but there's a cold front, and they move away very quickly to buying hake and salmon and importing something. And so connecting these two worlds is all about consistency, and it's all about doing that and reimagining it every day, 24-hour, 7 days a week. Having said that, though, within the ABALOBI platform, we've connected our work with what is called a fisheries improvement project. So how, again, do we put in a work plan with these small-scale fishers to shift towards ecological sustainability as well? And I'm really excited to say, Neil, that with your support, with support from many other chefs, home buyers, we've moved, over the last 5 years, we've moved a fishery where all fishers were catching in their basket, in their catch of the day, were catching, 50, 60% of their catch was on the red list. We moved it to a fishery and where 97% of what goes through the ABALOBI marketplace is on the green list. That's radical. That's a sort of a story of conservation. We're getting a lot of awards for this. It took the industrial trawl fishery in South Africa, the hake fishery, it took them 20 years to not even achieve half of this. And so that's my point. It's about help us get from red to orange to green. And yes, in winter, when the yellowtail are not coming close to shore, fishers, are still trying to survive. They're still trying to eke out a livelihood. It takes years for them to get out of poverty, to build their own social enterprise. Yeah. Work with them and what they catch with low impact fishing methods. I'm not talking about trawlers here or longliners. I'm talking about one hook, one line, one fish. Work with them and help them shift towards that sustainability, because they can't do it on their own. This is team effort.
We're also changing the perception of the public out there, I think, slowly. Like, we have all the time now on our menu Cape Bream and silvers. Yep. And silver is the fish that I never tasted before I worked with ABALOBI. And now we serve it like sashimi style, and it's amazing. But people out there in the public don't know it until they eat it in the restaurant. And then maybe when they come to their next little visit to the harbour and see silvers, they'll buy that. So I agree with you say, but it'll still be nice to have like maybe a 2-sentence. Because if a customer asks me that, I can't give him your answer. Now.
Just refer them to the podcast.
What you can do, though, Neil, is you can refer them to the QR code. That QR code is key. It's the window from the people sitting at your table. It's their window in what goes on in our oceans. It's their opportunity to read who, what, where, how, when. What's the story of these small-scale fishers? What's their journey? What are they doing towards sustainability? Right. And how can you support that?
Yeah. That's I said with the bad weather. That's why I mentioned earlier we take a little bit of a blanket approach. So we can't do it without good suppliers. But sometimes the weather is bad, and the ABALOBI marketplace, maybe there isn't something for us. I see you've added a line of frozen fish as well, which we've tried as well, which works. But that's why we looked at different suppliers and maybe a little bit of farmed things here. And so we can't just have fish on the menu. It's actually, if you eat here, you'll actually realize it's very little just fish. It's not you go from hake to salmon to snook to hake.
Yeah.
We do lots of shellfish and stuff like that in between as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think what I admire about the approach is, and I have quite strong views on this whole thing about the world. There's a lot of virtue signaling out there. There really is a hell of a lot. You get very upset because this fish was on the red list and it's the middle of fishing season and there's a starving fisherman on the west coast of South Africa whose kids will not eat that night unless that fisherman is getting what he can get or she can get, and it's that whole value chain, and it's difficult, I mean, Serge, you want to jump in there?
I do. You got to my sort of pet topic here. Look, I'm a fishery scientist. I'm a conservationist. Everything in my line of work is about trying to have a conversation with small-scale fishers about conservation. That's why I set up ABALOBI. But at the same time, I've realized from the get-go that it is a journey. How do we move from A to B to C? How do we rebuild our fisheries? Species on the red lists are of concern. There's no doubt about that. We need to be very careful around those species. At the same time, that's where we have the most opportunity. That's where we have the most opportunity to connect with small-scale fishers, to support their economic empowerment, to work with a marketplace that is shifting towards green-listed species, and give them an alternative. That's exactly what ABALOBI is. ABALOBI is an alternative livelihood for small-scale fishers who for generations have been indebted to their middlemen, have been disconnected from the market, have been focusing on 1, 2, 3, 4 species that are now overexploited.
Yeah, I think it makes a hell of a lot of sense. I mean, I wrote a column for Financial Mail, I think it was last year, caused a bit of a buzz, and it was around the whole ESG thing. And I wrote, what happened to the S and the G, and especially the S? And it was specifically around investing in coal, because there's this great belief that we can just flick a switch, boom, and coal is gone. Great, guys, we don't need coal anymore. Like, it's just completely unrealistic. So, by not doing any investing in coal of any kind, all that happened was energy prices went through the roof, and then low income people sit and freeze, so that high income people can sit there and feel hell of a good about the fact that the carbon footprint has come down slightly. Like, we need a balance. And I think what I admire about you is the balance, both of you, actually,
And we need to allow for that transition. Disengaging is the worst thing we can do.
Yeah, 100%. Because extreme approaches, I mean, that's the world today, right? It's politics, it's everything. Everything is extreme. For some reason, everyone is just so polarized now. I don't know if it's social media or whatever it is, but I mean, to find someone who has a balanced approach and a relatively centrist view of like, okay, if we take practical steps, things can get better. You don't necessarily need to be vegan, but you could think about taking steps if you feel strongly about that. You could eat 20% less meat and then 30% less meat, if that's a thing for you. It doesn't have to be extreme. And then if someone else doesn't believe what you believe, you can no longer be friends anymore. It's just a crazy world that we now live in. And I just admire the approach of actually being realistic about it. I think, we're running out of time, and I want to get one more word from each of you. I'm trying to think what the right question is to close off with each of you. So Neil, I'll go with you first. What would you be doing if you were not a chef? It's hard to think about with what you're in, because it's such a passion project, right?
I don't know.
I mean, that's the answer in and of itself, isn't it?
People always ask me, so do you enjoy it? And my answer is usually, yeah, every second day. You can't enjoy it every day. No, it's I actually don't know. If I didn't stumble into this industry, I'd probably would have stumbled into the gutter somewhere. So
yeah.
I think I'm happy where I am.
No, respect. Serge, I'm not asking. I will ask you the same question, actually.
Same question.
Do you have
really?
an answer?
Okay.
I've got one other one for you, though, specifically.
Okay. Well, look, I think the idea of being a marine biologist and diving and doing a whole bunch of research from research vessels that have all sorts of cool gadgets and equipment does appeal to me. And that's where I come from. But at the same time, I realized very early on that that's not how we're going to solve our fishery crisis. We're going to solve our fishery crisis by working very closely with people in the fishery, people in the post-harvest, people in the market.
So Serge, last question for you. For other entrepreneurs who are contemplating a social enterprise, and how they can kind of address a social issue in a way that is sustainable. So not relying on handouts, but building a business around that, which isn't necessarily a purely for-profit play, but, manages to wash its own face. That's obviously a very complicated thing. I think it's an incredible thing what you've built. Do you welcome people contacting you to sit down and have a coffee and learn from your experience?
I like coffee. You can also invite me to Galjoen.
Yes, no, I have no doubt. There we go.
No, of course I do. And it's very easy to find me or my colleagues or our program on the internet, on social media. And I do that, and I try and play that role with many sort of startup programs in and around South Africa. But I think my main advice, Ghost, is for anyone thinking, hey, I want to get into social entrepreneurship. I've actually got two pieces of advice. The first piece of advice is study the sector, study the ecosystem, get to know, embed yourself. There are a lot of people who have an idea and they kick off, but they actually have no embeddedness. They haven't really researched the sector. They don't know the complexity of the system. And do yourself a favor, like spend a couple of years just studying the system. And the second one is don't rush and experiment.
Yeah, no, I like it. Guys, I think that's what we have time for. A very sincere thanks to both of you for being on the show, and also just for being inspirational entrepreneurs. And I genuinely mean that. I don't say that lightly. I think what both of you have built is really, really impressive. I've experienced one. I haven't experienced ABALOBI directly, although I'm keen to check out the home buying, actually. I'll have a look at that. And I would encourage listeners to do the same. Come and visit Galjoen. Come and have an amazing meal here. Come and support a local business. Treat yourself. It's very special. This is not just food. This is art. So, Neil, Serge, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. That was fun.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you.